My name is Janet Jones, as we said, and last year I received a diagnosis of ASD 3 days before my 60th birthday. Best birthday present I ever had. When I went to the GP to ask the referral for Asperger's assessment, I was asked, why do you want an assessment now? My answer was simply to know who I am and understand the problems that I've had. Thank you. This is currently a work in progress, as since the diagnosis I've been trying to separate myself from my robot. But they've become so entwined it's become almost impossible. Sorry, I am quite nervous at the moment. You may very well be politely listening and wondering to yourselves, what robot? Well, you're looking at it. I think most of you saw me at reception when you came in. You met the robot then. It's how I function. My robot's been my protector throughout my life, helping me as an undiagnosed autistic to live in and cope with a neurotypical world. And its creation, repair and maintenance are what I'm going to talk about today. As all good stories start, once upon a time, there was a little girl who at the age of 6 spent 6 weeks in hospital. Sitting in bed all day, she started watching and realised she was different from the other children, and she didn't understand how people worked, and she started to study people. After 3 months bed rest, she returned to school where everybody was still doing what they did before, but her awareness had changed. And she realised though she did try very hard, she just didn't fit in. At this stage, she started having headaches and nausea and missing school. And as she was still under the consultant, the puzzle began, what's wrong with her? There's something wrong, but we don't know what it is. So she hid inside herself a little bit, and when she became unwell, she would hide in her room with her books, her constant companions. Social stories. I think possibly most of you have heard about social stories. They're intended to break experiences down to clear facts to enable autistic children to understand the world a bit better. Well, this little girl's social stories were written by authors like Jane Austen, the Brontes, Leo Tolstoy. Try figuring out how she felt when they didn't play out, life didn't play out to these stories. Religion was a large part of her life. Every Sunday she was marched to church in her Sunday best clothes, where she heard a man telling everybody, love thy neighbour. And then going outside to her mother and mother's friends saying, so-and-so's having a baby, isn't that lovely? Yes, but so is so-and-so, isn't it awful? What is going on? Love everybody, especially after having a baby, but not if she is having a baby. Give me a break, stop talking in riddles. The little girl loved playing out of doors with her brother, where she would get into all sorts of trouble because she had no fear. Her uncle used to watch her play and told her mother, there's nothing too hot or too heavy for that girl. Metaphors, another minefield, but studying the words and the context which they used makes them part of the robot files for use. This is what childhood was like. There she bounces in, the robot. Can I go out and play? But life, unfortunately, was filled with shoulds and musts. Sunday, church today, brownies, piano lessons, party, need to go and visit someone, go into the pictures, back to school. I need to go to my room. There was every time all this pressures were put on, there was just a need to hide and run away from it all. She found schoolwork easy, 11 plus, mock exam. She went out into the yard after and went to say, that was fun, wasn't it? But before she could say anything, she overheard others saying, wasn't that awful? And others agreeing. She kept her thoughts to herself, and the robot started to take over. The nightmare truly began. She passed the 11 plus with flying colours and went to the girls' grammar school. Everyone said, congratulations. Sorry, forgot that one. Congratulations, you're the first person in the family to go to grammar school. No pressure there then. Suited and booted in a shiny new uniform with hat, which I hated, she went along not knowing what to expect. There were two other girls from her old school who had passed the exam and were in the bottom set. She was in the top. The work she thoroughly enjoyed at first, but break times were more difficult. She tried to seek out the two girls she knew, but they'd made new friends in their own class, and she didn't know how to do that. This slide shows an example of how it felt at school. School assembly. Again, the robot bounces in the morning. Soon gets a bit busier. People come in, gets overcrowded. Noise. School assembly. What school assembly? Proximity of people. Smells. Movement. Light. Touch. The latecomers. Heat. Uh-oh, there she goes. Okay, it was a school full of girls and she had no idea how they worked. She'd always known boys. And her brain was practical, logical and problem solving. Again, the work was no problem, but negotiating all the new social requirements was impossible. She just couldn't work things out, and the periods of being unwell became more frequent and she missed more and more school. The embryonic robot was tattered and torn and couldn't cope with keeping her safe. She needed more and more time to repair and maintain it, but the damage was so great, however hard she tried, she couldn't keep up with the work and it was nearly destroyed. During this time, in the background to the story, were visits to GPs, consultants and specialists, I'm not quite sure in what, on a regular basis. It went on and on with the same result. There's something wrong with her, but we don't know what it is. Every time the little girl sat there wondering, what's the matter with me? Why aren't I like everyone else? And as she's being discussed, thinking, that's not right, I don't feel that way. So I must be wrong? And why don't they ask me? Only once was she actually asked by a doctor how she felt, but by then the robot knew that she had to be kept safe, and she didn't know what answer to give that would be right. So she stayed silent. The broken robot went to the doctors. How is she today? What has she been like? Has she been to school? We'll try an ECG, an EEG, a barrier meal, X-ray, medication. We'll try. We give up. There's something wrong with her, but we don't know what it is. The story has followed her throughout her life. Up to this point, the story has been told, as you probably noticed, in the third person, because that was how it felt. Looking back, I see the child objectively, as though looking at her rather than out of her. I was never involved in what happened to her. The discussion was always about she and never about I. The only time I could be me was when my brother was with my brother or in my room. And by this time, the room had become more and more an emergency repair room rather than a place of solace. Now, however, I can take on the first person because here I am, myself, for the first time. Parents, please take a gentle hint here. Even if your child doesn't have a voice of their own, they still need to be listened to. This was a lesson I took into motherhood and tried my best to listen to what my children were saying and what they weren't. I reached the age of 15 and, as my mother couldn't cope with me anymore, apparently, and the doctors had failed to find an answer, I was shipped off to Whitchurch Hospital, a mental health facility, into a fairly new young people's unit where I spent several months as an inpatient. At least now they were looking in the right direction inside my head. But this was 1973 and Asperger's wasn't a known thing, and certainly autism as I presented it wasn't even an option. I know at one time they thought my problems may be related to the time spent in hospital or puberty. Really? From the age of 6? What a precocious child I must have been. I don't know because I wasn't told, but I assume they think I was cured because I had no episodes there. Why was that? Well, my experience of this place was it was a closed environment with little access to the outside world, no pressure to do anything I didn't want to do. I could interact with others or not, as I chose, except group meetings, which are uncomfortable but manageable because I knew who was going to be there and what was expected. Autistic heaven from my point of view. This gave me the space to evaluate how I fitted or didn't into this small world, which became a template for my future life. My robot became fully formed and operational, but with a lot to learn. Life in the real world started. This is a whistle-stop tour through my adult life. I came out, I worked in the co-op. One of the girls took me under her wing and included me socially in her group. And I started going out, but using alcohol to ease conversation and interaction. I started travelling on my own because nobody else wanted to go, so I went anyway. Strangers are much easier to talk to because they accept the robot without question. I wanted to go to Stratford-on-Avon to see Shakespeare. I couldn't get any interest from anyone, so I went anyway. The following year, I went to Malta for 2 weeks, age 18. Doing a survey based on the buses lasted a year and ended up in Monmouth. A fab summer with people who had only met me that year, so accepted my robot was functioning very well. I got married, had 2 children, and this was the time when I didn't have a safe space, so I found a safe time instead. 5 a.m. in the morning, I went out with my dog for a walk, then prepared whatever we'd be having for tea, so I wouldn't have to do it when there were so many other things going on. My oasis of tranquility before the storm of the day. School, work, shopping, socialising, I still use that time now. My daughters were my world. I learned so much from them, and we spent as much time as possible outside, whatever the weather. I think I had a second and better childhood with them, as the focus of it was all about them. I started work as a cleaner in the sports centre, transferred to a country park where I spent a few happy years until it got bigger and things changed, creating more pressure. My marriage broke down. I wanted to get out to the country park but had no qualifications because I'd left school at 15. Did I mention I never take the easy route? If there's a more difficult one, I started an access course in college, and then I started a degree course in history, English and IT. I could have done a joint one, 2 subjects, but chose 3 because I get bored easily. I was still working full time at this time, by the way. I crashed. I wonder why. I have a problem connecting my body feelings of anxiety with my brain. They just don't talk to each other, so I don't know when anxiety is building. This moment I don't feel anxiety. Probably later on I think, oh my God, what happened? This was a bad one, where the robot fell apart and had to be totally rebuilt. There were times when I thought it, and therefore I, wouldn't make it back out this time. So a counsellor was the first person who would ever actually listen to me. And as my robot was badly broken and there was nowhere to hide, saw some of the real me. Finished my degree, got a 2-1. My workplace finished me on permanent ill health and gave me my pension, age 50 and on the scrap heap. Well, that's how it felt at the time, but things changed. I met my partner Alan, and we got on really well. You'll find out why shortly. Applied for, was accepted on a postgraduate diploma in counselling at Newport University. This was hard because to be a counsellor you have to really look at yourself and let other people in. My robot wasn't at all comfortable with that. Excuse me. As a counsellor, I had a client who was suffering depression, and his GP suggested that he had or was Asperger's. We got on really well. This was the first time I'd really looked into AS, Asperger's syndrome, and I realised that Alan had a lot of the same traits. Here's the reason why we got on so well. Al got diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome 5 years ago. Going through that process with him triggered light bulbs in my head. I recognised that, I was like that, but I couldn't be because I can talk to people, and I'm a counsellor. Misconceptions I made then, and I see regularly now. I finally read a story online of a woman with AS and realised I was reading my life story. Now that was an oh my God moment if ever there was one. 6 months later, I was lucky I got a diagnosis. Alas, the words that haunted me have changed. There's something wrong with you, but we don't know what it is. Change that day to there's something different about me, and I know what it is. Woohoo! And that, in answer to your question at the beginning, Doctor, is why I wanted a diagnosis. In conclusion, from childhood, I watched and learned and programmed my robot with scripted responses, smiles, gestures, and basically the robot performed as I should. While I hid inside in the driver's seat with my secrets tightly packed around me. When it got so crammed it was about to burst, I took it home, unloaded it, analysed and sorted what it contained, filed what I could, and reprogrammed it ready for action again. This is how the robot works. The robot is strong, sorry. Expectations of my ability to cope by myself and other people were high. Because I knew I could do it, I took on too much. More wrong bits of me kept inside. Pressure to get it right. The pressure cooker effect, which feels as if it'll blow. Becoming unwell and have a minor or major shutdown. Emergency, unload, analyse, repair and recover, so the robot is strong again. This may give some hope or reassurance to parents that when I was a child, the constant buzz in my head of unknown information coming in and the frantic attempts to process all of it with no comparison was mind-blowing. But as I've grown older, my frame of reference has grown and the robot has been in place to deal with the mundane scripted meeting and greeting and interacting, and it freed my mind, the driver, to process any new information against that frame of reference. And at my age, new information is less often. Having the diagnosis has allowed all the files that have been hastily unpacked and roughly filed to be sorted in a more orderly way. If I'd been diagnosed as a child, I wouldn't have had the isolation that living in a robot has brought. But it's part of me now. I wouldn't or couldn't be without it. Thank you for listening to me. I won't be taking any questions now, but I will be available in the question and answer session at 3 o'clock. Okay, thank you very much.
Right. I am a factotum. That is, I do a mixture of things. Musician, translator, podcaster, and occasional teacher of music. And in the case of today, speaker. Now, I wasn't diagnosed with AS until I was 16, and I still don't understand why, even now. It was obvious way before then that something was wrong. For one thing, I was badly raised. When I was 13, for example, the person concerned criticised me for behaving very grown-up towards a gamelan exhibition host. Well, if I'd have asked her, how should I behave, she would have said, just act normal. What does that mean? Behave like a child or a teenager and run wildly all around the room causing damages as a result? Surely that's not the kind of behaviour that civilised people appreciate. And who says that that's typical teenager behaviour anyway? I was simply being myself. And what's wrong with that? What's wrong even with being different? There is no such thing as normal, and we don't fit into this world by pretending to be something we're not. We fit in by being ourselves, who we are, and we're allowed to do that as long as we're mature-natured. How we look on the outside is one thing, but it's what we do in person that matters. I remember when I was in Scandinavia a few years ago, I was performing in a conference. I met a boy, probably 12 years old, half Norwegian, half American. When I look back now, I realised that he wasn't blending with the other children, and he was staring at me frequently. Why? What did he see in me? Well, not to boast in any way, but I think he saw an individual like him who doesn't like running wildly or blending with really big or really small groups, only older of course. To cut it short, a mirror image. Now, I don't usually do well with children, but him and I actually got on, and before departures, the last thing I said to him was, whatever it is you want to do in life, just make sure you have it in here. And to carry on from there, I've always enjoyed translating ever since I was a small child, and I'm the only member in my family tree whose education was taught through the medium of Welsh, but that's irrelevant. Welsh is purely just my preferred language. But also, ever since winning Best Musician Award at the National Eisteddfod 2014, I've wanted to raise broad awareness on AS and autism, and one way of doing this was through the Welsh media, due to the fact that people watch or listen to too much television and radio, in which case, as they flick through channels, they would hopefully bump into a program that they feel encouraged to learn something from. I've appeared on Heno, Prynhawn Da, Dechrau Canu, Dechrau Canmol, Bore Cothi, to name a few. And towards the end of last year, I launched the first season of my bilingual podcast series, Life Within Asperger Syndrome, in order to raise broad awareness. But I didn't do this purely because I wanted to. I did it because someone has to. What's missing in this world is equality. As I said once on ITV, whether an individual has Down syndrome or motor neuron or something, people don't like to be labelled. Having said that, I run a history group at an AS centre, and one of my colleagues there has muscular dystrophy, in which case, whenever I feel it's needed, I help her, for instance, to carry a heavy screen projector up the stairs, which isn't good for her health. But I don't make a big fuss about it. Why? Because she doesn't like it. Well, she wouldn't like it, I should say. And it's not that matters anyway. I'm not interested that she has muscular dystrophy. You know, she's good-natured, she's helpful. In fact, she even gets you coffee sometimes when you never even asked for it. What an angel! But anyone can do that. It doesn't make a difference if someone was dyslexic or dyspraxic, or if they had eczema on their face or something. We are all people. We're all humans. We all have different skills, abilities, and interests. And there is nothing abnormal about people such as Warwick Davis or Stephen Hawking. They too have skills and abilities, and they are very creative. We do what we do in life because we have it in here. And being different, or doing things differently, I should say, is what makes this world colourful. In which case, especially with a lot more awareness increasing, why won't the government acknowledge an individual's needs? Why won't employers learn better when some of us are still looking for jobs? When will this change? When will there be an end to discrimination in general? When will people in need stop suffering? Employers expect too much when recruiting, especially in this day and age. An individual with AS may or may not answer a question, for example, in a way that was expected, but surely what matters is that it's an honest answer and it's within the context. Employers think that those with AS are incapable of doing the job just because of their condition. Well, that's Tommy rot, and I am sick of it. I guess I'm just fortunate, especially after 2 years of unemployment, to have been recruited by a company that understand the needs of those with AS and autism. Though actually, I began as one of their clients when other companies in the job market just wouldn't take me on. My manager decided that the company needed a translator, and so I was offered the position. And then I went through the Access to Work scheme, which the company are really positive about doing. In fact, 50% of the people who work with us are on the autism spectrum, and it's this scheme that's helped such people to gain employment. I may be employed now, but I can't not feel for others. High expectations from employers just narrow their options down, and that only leads to more suffering. If all of us worldwide simply accepted everybody as they are, while simultaneously acknowledging their needs and sensitivities, etc., this would be a more considerate, caring, and better world with justice for everybody. Over to you.